Today's episode is sponsored by Mishka Jewelry, this amazing jewelry brand. My favorite piece is the female nudity charm, which I attach to my favorite earrings. Go to www.mishkajewelry.com, quote Francesca 15 at the checkout, and enjoy your shopping. Today, at Longevity Edit, we are here with Dr Maurizio Orani, a clinical psychologist and independent psychotherapist. We are going to talk about something that men are uncomfortable to talk about, which is emotion and feeling, and how this is linked to sex and how the three together are not far from each other. Dr. Maurizio, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
My first question is, and I always wonder, are men bad at emotion or they simply don't have a heart at all?
I would say the men are not bad at emotions. Men are bad at certain emotions because since an early age they've been somehow trained not to show those emotions that makes us feel vulnerable. Like, for example, anger, fear, sadness, or shame. Whereas other emotions are more acceptable, like, I don't know, anger, for example, aggressiveness, disgust. So in this perspective, what happens is that we're more relaxed, showing to the world what is accepted and what is not accepted or acceptable.
But do you think as a society we have confused masculinity with suppressing feelings and emotion for men?
At this point, I would say that society has associated over time masculinity with strength. Unfortunately, strength doesn't mean suppressing emotions or vulnerability. On the contrary, strength means being able to play with emotions and use them to make us able to function better. So what is called emotional stability is what should be associated with masculinity today, whereas over time we had a tendency to create this image of men that impacted men themselves or men's self-image, getting to a point where we created this model of very toxic masculinity.
But do you think that boys are trained or have learned since at a young age to suppress their feeling and to say, we word like stop crying, be a man, be strong. So they have learned, the society conditioned them to suppress their feeling because they associate masculinity with being strong, don't cry.
Absolutely. I would say this is a yes. Since we started developing societies, we were, as men, socializing with other men, so creating groups was essential for survival. It means that many activities were based on belonging to a group. Now, imagine that those certain emotions, like, for example, sadness again, are not acceptable. At that point, the exclusion from the group means death. So since an early age, but since we started becoming human beings really, we've been trained not to be emotional or not to show what emotions or negative impact of emotions can express in a group, for example. So emotions and acceptance in men are on the same space.
But what psychologically, biologically happen when a man shuts down due to stress or conflict or like, oh my God, there is a war?
Since we're not used to dealing with emotions, what happens is that we create these mechanisms of coping with them in different ways. When we are pushed into a space of stress, high stress, for example, of conflict, what happens is that the brain literally disconnects. We get into a space of survival, let's say. In that sense, our brain is getting into a spot called fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
What happened cognitively is that our brain disconnect from this part, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is giving us plans and reasoning, and connects to a more deeper part of the brain, which is instincts, and pushes us to react instead of respond to the environment. So at that point, when we shut down, we want either to attack or usually run away.
I understand. Can unresolved trauma, chronic stress, have an impact on a man's libido and erection, and in fact cause erectile dysfunction?
Yes, several studies are now showing how there is a direct link between level of stress, libido, and sexual dysregulation. When a brain, or if vulnerability, for example, or presence in the space or intimacy is perceived as dangerous, threatening, what happens to our brains is that we stop thinking, literally. We stop connecting with our emotions and our feelings, and we disconnect. When we disconnect, we get into a self-protective space or state, which is fight or flight. So our immediate reaction in that space is either to attack or run away. In this situation, it's impossible to relax. This, especially with men, means that there is a massive impact on erectile function and intimacy in general.
And why are some men so sexually confident but emotionally deficient?
I want to say that the two things are quite different. So being sexually confident is more linked sometimes, especially when sex is used to escape or as a coping mechanism, are more linked to performance, experience, body of self-awareness, whereas intimacy is more linked to the capacity of letting go, finding an emotional safe space, connect to emotions. And in this context, what happens is that I can practice a performance, but I can't really practice intimacy. So sometimes the two things are not linked at all. So many men enter the space of sex just as a space of performance.
So basically for a man is more like is a physically action rather than an intimacy act. Like for a woman is completely different,
Could
right?
be different, yeah, absolutely. Women need to connect to be relaxed in the space. Now it's slightly changed. Over time, it changed the perception of sex as a performance, even for women. But for men, this has been there for quite a long time. So yes, sex and intimacy are not necessarily linked. They might be linked for some men, but sometimes they're not.
Is this why men disconnect straight after sex? So basically, is this why, you know, some men have sex and then they're like, okay, bye, you know, it's like, ciao, I'm leaving. And as a woman, we are like, oh my God, what's going on, you know? So, you know, straight after sex, they dissociate themselves.
Absolutely. The two things are clearly linked. So if you imagine sex as a performance, when the performance ends the space of connection, of contact. So a man is not just satisfied, but doesn't know what to do with that intimacy. Because in that space, if I'm not performing, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stay intimate. So if we separate the two things and we imagine that performance starts and ends, after that, there is no need to connect.
As a woman, can we do something to make a man feel more comfortable, you think?
In that space, I think it should be done before sex. I think it should be done in a space where you need to understand if that space is for both of you a space of intimacy and connection, or if it's just about performing.
So just like a one-night stand?
You know, this is a bit tricky as a question, because if I talk to you about something that you're not comfortable with, I'm putting you in a spot where you can react with, I don't know, closing up or anger or feeling threatened. So talking about that thing immediately after sex can be counterproductive actually, instead of functional.
Productive.
Instead of functional, absolutely.
So we should just reward, like we should just go back with our emotion as a woman and don't show feeling to make a man more comfortable?
You should understand who are you going with, first of all. So that's the main thing. I mean, I believe that courting and I believe dating is one of the most useful ways to understand if that man is emotionally available or not. So the mismatch is not about the performance itself, but it's about what you expect, what women can expect in that space, and what's real. If I'm expecting intimacy and I get performance, then I'm going to be disappointed. But if I know that that space is going to be a space of performance, it's going to be, I don't know, fun, but that is when everything ends, then there is consistency, with the expectations and act.
I was talking with one of my friend who is young, so maybe I think something is changing and evolving with our society, because he said, I cannot just have sex if I have no feelings, because after that I feeling guilty because I use the girl, which usually is the girl all the time that feels used. So do you think that in our society the vision of a healthy man is changing?
I think over time we are becoming more emotionally competent. So I think over time we're defining a different image of what a man should be. Of course, society is changing, and with this change is changing the way we participate in society. There are spaces where men are what they used to be, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years ago. But at this point, I would say that more men are accessing, for example, psychotherapy, or they're being more open, or they be socialized differently. Because don't forget that at the end of the day, society has an impact on men's self-perception, but at the same time, women have a massive impact on education.
I understand. So what does a healthy man looks like today related to emotion?
I think a healthy man should be able to regulate their own emotions. Being healthy emotionally doesn't mean that you have to act on every emotion or you have to express everything that you're feeling. That's something for big movies or something else. But being healthy emotionally means that you're able to recognize your emotion, you're able to do something with that emotion, to show it if it's functional, or to keep it for yourself if it's not. So the main thing is, the more regulation there is among perception, identifying and expressing, the more a man experiences a healthy relationship with emotions.
Fantastic. And do you think that this unresolved trauma, chronic stress, conflict can be detrimental for a man's health and long-term longevity? So, say, has got an impact on aging faster for men?
Absolutely. So many studies at this point showed how there is a link between stress or emotional stress, especially linked with unresolved trauma, coping mechanisms to stress, and longevity. There is a massive physical impact on, for example, inflammation levels. So if we are overstressed, our bodies cannot deal with inflammation, so cannot cure the body.
Mm-hmm.
And this physically and cognitively, for example, is linked to early dementia or Parkinson or Alzheimer or many other psychological conditions, for example, depression.
And also, as we say, the erectile dysfunction can be one of them.
Absolutely.
Why do so many men chase chaos, toxic relationship, instead than something more stable and relaxing?
I think some people in general, but in this society, more and more, we all go in that direction, are responding to high level of dopamine. So we're moving our response from serotonin to dopamine responses. In this situation, this could be a behavior that we learned when we were a child, for example, because, in this society now, our parents are kind of fitting our day with many activities, and we don't have time just to to do nothing. In that case, the brain is basically reprogramming itself to respond to peaks instead of stability, existing, staying, feeling, expressing. So once we get to that, in that space when we need the dopamine, the adrenaline and noradrenaline in our system start raising, and in that case we just literally addicted to experiences or
endorphin, you know, like biologically you get addicted of this feeling of excitement, which is like the raise of endorphin and dopamine.
Especially dopamine. Endorphins, yeah, are part of the system, but the dopamine is the one that is pushing us to kind of seek these kind of experiences. So more and more dangerous, more and more pushing, more and more exciting, as you said. So yes.
Can men heal emotionally without talking about feelings?
Yes, absolutely. Especially nowadays, we have new techniques that don't require really talking or recognizing the trauma to be able to heal from that. Eventually, healing from trauma doesn't mean that you're forgetting what happened. Healing from trauma means that what happened in the past is not affecting our present. So we need to literally move those experiences from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. So we learn how to exist with them without being impacted by them.
I was reading The Body Keep the Score. Very interesting book to prepare for this podcast. And they say that to heal from trauma, you can write a diary, or you can express your feelings through movement. Is this more related to women, or is both? It can work for both sex?
I would say that those techniques are more related to our capacity to self-reflect on ourselves. So if a person, especially men, unfortunately in this case, we're less used to thinking about our feelings, as we said, or stopping and perceiving what's inside us. We're much more focused on actions or whatever is outside of us. So in that case, those techniques are not effective, because you need to have the capacity to sit and reflect on what's going on inside yourself. So I'd say there are no statistics, but usually women are more self-competent men.
So which technique you could use or you use to heal trauma?
With men especially, what I do is something called EMDR. So
explain. I'm intrigued. What does it stand for?
Eye movement, desensitization and reprogramming is called. In this technique, you don't need to talk about what you experience, or not necessarily need to talk about this experience. I can show you if you want, but what EMDR is about is literally recreating the same movement that we naturally do during REM sleep. In that phase of the sleep, what the brain does, moves the information from short-term memory to long-term memory. So what I would do in session with you, for example, if we're talking about trauma, is literally help you to move your eyes and follow my fingers.
Okay, let's show the audience then. What do we do?
So you will be thinking about your trauma, and I would ask you to just follow my fingers. So from here, you just don't move your head. This is what happens. I'll stop you, and through this mechanism, the brain, which is actually, so the theory behind it is quite interesting, to be fair, and it's nowadays quite useful because you can reduce the impact of emotions linked to trauma by 95% with one session. That means that for that specific memory, your brain is not hyperactive or is not in fight or flight anymore, which is a massive result nowadays. So the interesting thing about the EMDR technique is that we believe that the brain, like your body, has the same capacity of repairing itself. I don't know, if you cut yourself, for example, your body is going to do all the work. You're not going to do anything. Same thing is for the brain. So we need to let the brain work in the way it works usually, which is through eye movements.
How interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Maurizio. It was such a pleasure to have you in the show, and hopefully you're going to be with us again really soon.
Thank you very much.